Everybody showed up. Thank you for coming out. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm Steve Kachecki, the Public Information Officer for the Denver Field Division of the DEA. Thanks for coming out for our press conference. In a short moment, I'm going to introduce my boss, Special Agent in Charge, Brian Besser. He'll be followed by District Attorney John Kellner. We'll have time for questions at the end, and I believe sidebar interviews, gentlemen, afterwards, if you want to do them, some stand-ups. But with that being said, it's going to be my boss, Special Agent in Charge, Brian Besser. Thank you.
Okay, well, good morning. There's some tight space up here. I'm going to try to put some of my notes in up here. Number one, thank you for coming this morning and hearing what. It's safe to say that there is no shortage right now of media coverage regarding the current fentanyl crisis in our country. In fact, I fear that the public may be developing some sort of media fatigue, if you will, on the issue due to the constant barrage of fake pill seizures, poisonings, overdose-related deaths. Regardless of the news coverage, there is one thing that does not change for law enforcement personnel, and that is the lethality of this drug. I feel that as time goes on and as the community gets barraged with stories, that the importance of the lethality of this drug can become clouded or obscured. In my 31 years of law enforcement, I have never seen anything like the current drug crisis and how it is adversely affecting our communities. So real briefly, before we get into some of the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about, I would like to summarize the current threat landscape of the fentanyl crisis. And this is important, and I'll tell you why. We have a lot of stories in the news right now about fentanyl. You're going to hear today from me, from the DEA, on what the current threat is in our community, and I'm going to be very candid with you because this is not a topic that we are going to sugarcoat because the stakes could not be any higher. The availability and accessibility, and I underscore those two words, the availability and the accessibility of fake pills right now is absolutely staggering. They are available everywhere and can be obtained with little effort. The illicit drug market right now is currently oversaturated with fake pills. And this inherently drives the price point down, and that makes these fake pills extremely cheap right now. Consequently, the drug syndicates are resorting to new and innovative measures to flood the market with fentanyl-related substances so that they can have maximum appeal to the unsuspecting users. This creates a very deadly phenomena that is extremely hard for law enforcement to stop. We are now seeing fentanyl and other deadly synthetic analogs routinely being mixed with conventional street drugs. Like what? We see fentanyl being mixed with cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and yes, marijuana. This has been one of the leading contributors to the overdose cluster events that we've seen here in our home state of Colorado. Are drugs being mixed with fentanyl and the unsuspecting users not knowing that that drug that they thought was cocaine was actually adulterated with fentanyl, and they subsequently died. With the universal availability of smartphones, our youth are especially vulnerable because they are being targeted on social media to purchase these deadly drugs. They have the immediate ability to locate, communicate, and purchase deadly drugs online in total anonymity. And I want to underscore that for a minute. I've never seen this in my life as a federal drug law enforcement officer for 30 years. The fact that you can purchase deadly drugs in seconds in total anonymity. And the teen poisonings and overdose deaths from this unparalleled accessibility is nothing short of tragic. And we will talk about some of those statistics in a minute. This year alone, the DEA Rocky Mountain Division has seized over 1.5 million fake pills. That was as of March 31st. Those numbers are already old. I'm quite confident that we are well over 2 million, but we don't have the stats yet to back that up. 1.1 million of those pills were seized right here in Colorado. 1.1 million. And I'm telling you, I know the numbers are much lower reported, but they're going to be much higher. We have nearly 50 active investigations in death resulting cases from fentanyl overdose right now. Numerous investigations where social media was used to purchase drugs online, and all of these social media cases have at least one death resulting case in it. If you've been following the national news coverage this week, you have seen the recent and highly alarming bulk fentanyl seizure on our local Colorado roadways. To date, this is the largest fentanyl seizure on any U.S. highway involving fentanyl. On June 6th, just to recap, officers with the Colorado State Patrol seized 114 pounds of pure fentanyl powder. Notice I'm not saying pills. Pure fentanyl powder. The vehicle is headed towards Denver on I-70 near Georgetown, and I want to give major thanks and kudos to Colorado State Patrol for their aggressive, judicious hard work on our roadways, stopping this poison from coming into our communities. This, I can't underscore enough how significant this seizure was, and DEA is actively working with CSP on investigating this case. 114 pounds. What does that mean? Well, DEA estimates that 1 kilogram, which is 2.2 pounds, can kill up to 500,000 people if lethal doses are ingested. Let me repeat that. 1 kilo, 2.2 pounds, can kill up to 500,000 people. The June 6th seizure had the potential to kill over 25 million people. Let me put that in perspective. The entire population of the state of Colorado is 6 million people. And we could kill 25 million people with what was in the trunk of a car or hidden in a car. So in my opinion, bulk fentanyl quantities like this hold the caliber of a weapons of mass destruction type concern. When we take into consideration the worst possible outcomes of this poison being pushed out in mass in our communities. I've never seen anything like this, ever, which is why we wanted to have this press conference today. We do not have a lot of pills here. We do not have a lot of firearms lined up on the table. We wanted you to just absorb the data and the import of this threat. So why this press conference today? As a federal agency, the DEA relies heavily on productive relationships with our state and local allies. The 18th Judicial District is one of DEA's most aggressive partners in combating this burgeoning fentanyl crisis. DA Kellner and myself wanted to pause for a moment during the battle to report back to the community some productive news, if you will, on what we are doing to strategically address the problem. You guys are constantly hearing about the problem, and that's good. We have to know what we need to fix before we can fix it. We want to give you some productive results of how we are strategically, as a team, addressing this problem. Our overarching goals are twofold. Number one, we want to save lives through cooperative and aggressive law enforcement. Number two, we want to hold accountable these greed-driven and profit-driven enterprises, these predators who are peddling this poison with seemingly immunity across our communities, and bring them to justice. This partnership was developed over the past 6 years, way before my time and DA Kellner's time. However, we are adamantly committed to ensuring it remains fruitful. In the last few years, DEA personnel have worked side by side, intimately, aggressively with the 18th Judicial District prosecutors on over 20 significant cases that, in my opinion, have immeasurable community impact in the greater Denver area. These cases include the following statistics, and in my opinion, these are very impressive. From a law enforcement officer, we can throw statistics out all day, but whether they're statistics that hold water are another story. These do. These cases include 65 high-level defendants. They include roughly 500,000, 500,000 fake fentanyl pills just here in this judicial district alone. 360 pounds of methamphetamine. And I want to remind you, methamphetamine across the Midwest and across the West is often still king. It is being overshadowed and eclipsed by the current fentanyl and opioid crisis. But methamphetamine is still massive, and the cartels have a very focused interest in getting methamphetamine into the West. 360 pounds of methamphetamine. 114 pounds of heroin, 104 pounds of cocaine, 198 firearms have been taken off the street because of this partnership. And I can't underscore that enough with the recent events in the media these last 2 days. And last but not least, over $16 million in United States currency or drug proceeds have been retrieved back from criminal networks because of good police work. The DEA Rocky Mountain Division is aggressively pursuing fentanyl and those who traffic it within our communities, and the 18th Judicial District stalwartly supports our efforts to bring these criminals to justice. I think it's safe to say that DEA Kellner provides DEA with some of the most tenacious and determined local prosecution, and the consequences of which are actively reverberating right now through the criminal community. We listen. My undercovers listen, and they know what's going on out there because we make it our point to know. And they're not happy with the aggressive prosecution. They would rather go someplace else. So why does this even matter? These are my closing comments. Why does this press conference even matter? I wanted to give you guys something different today. Not just a doom and gloom story, but I wanted you to see that behind the scenes there is aggressive and tenacious police work being done and prosecution being done to save lives and to bring people to justice. We are not asleep at the wheel. I would like to remind the public that no one is immune from this drug crisis. Nobody. It's in your neighborhoods. It is saturated. It is everywhere. It is in the workplace. The greater Denver area is the crossroads of the West. And our communities here are in the direct line of fire as critical transshipment points for transnational criminal organizations who are seeking to increase their poison on the market. And I'm going to leave it there. Otherwise, I'm going to be getting into data and intelligence that is very, very concerning. We are in the line of fire, so to speak, just because where we are geographically placed. The I-70 and I-25 corridors are where deadly drugs head north and east, and money heads south. Okay? It's just pragmatic business sense. What we accomplish here with the 18th affects our safety and our well-being across the country. And I want to thank DA Kellner and his staff, and just as importantly, our state and local counterparts. We have the sheriffs from Arapahoe and Douglas here, my partners from Denver PD. DEA is a big, small outfit. We cannot accomplish what we do without the expertise, the input, the commitment from our state and local partners, and I, for one, thoroughly thank them for their partnership with DEA. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to DA Kellner, who will conclude with more statements.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. My name is John Kellner. I'm the District Attorney for the 18th Judicial District, representing Arapahoe, Douglas, Elbert, and Lincoln counties. And I appreciate Special Agent in Charge Brian Besser talking about the overall issues with fentanyl in our communities and the overall threat landscape, as he described it, for what we see, not just here in our district, but across the state of Colorado. Before I go on to talk about this particular indictment and the 8 individuals who've been indicted through our grand jury in the 18th Judicial District, I especially want to thank these other folks here, and I know they got a brief shout out, but I cannot stress this enough. You know, our organized crime unit is headed up by Chief Deputy District Attorney Darcy Kofel. She's seated over here to my left. She is one of the driving forces behind our aggressive prosecution and our ability to bring these complex cases through the grand jury, through wiretap investigations, and then to fruition with arrests like we see here today. But she doesn't just lead our office in that regard. We work hand in hand with our local partners. I cannot thank these folks enough. Representing the Douglas County Sheriff's Office is Captain Darren Weekly, Tyler Brown, the Sheriff of Arapahoe County. It bears mentioning, folks, that these people provide task force officers to the DEA and the task force that it basically does this boots on the ground work. None of this happens without their efforts. And I also want to thank Commander Paul Jimenez from the Denver Police Department. These were some of the lead task force officers from their agencies working on this case. So, as I mentioned just a bit ago, we had 8 individuals indicted through our grand jury in the 18th Judicial District. These people were indicted for their roles both as smugglers and distributors in a drug trafficking organization that focused on meth, heroin, and of course deadly fentanyl pills, not just here within our community, but in the Denver metro area as well. The investigation began in December of 2021 with a single purchase of narcotics. And I stress that because there's been a lot of talk about how do we tackle the cartels and what they are doing to our communities. It starts with a small case, and then it can be built into something meaningful, like this one here today, that will significantly hamper a cartel's ability to import and distribute these drugs in our community. So a single purchase in December of 2021 leads to additional purchases, which leads to wiretap investigations, which leads to seizures outside of apartments and on the highway. These cases, oftentimes, as a prosecutor, we don't have the resources to handle this, right? We want to build these cases, but we need the support of both our state and local partners and the people that fund these offices to be able to build an organized crime unit like this, to take something small and make it what it is here today. The source of these narcotics originated in Mexico. There is an unindicted co-conspirator that we have yet to identify as the primary source that would coordinate with this drug trafficking organization to bring the drugs up from Mexico and distribute them across 18th Judicial District and the Denver metro area. As I mentioned, we used all of our law enforcement tools at our disposal here, things from the old-fashioned buy like you would see on The Wire, all the way to, of course, our wiretap investigation, our grand jury, and multiple search warrants. The largest seizure in this case resulted in roughly 170,000 fentanyl pills being seized from a vehicle outside an apartment in Aurora. Now, the pills were packaged for quick distribution. You can see this right here. They're not just in these large Ziploc bags, but they're in these small bags as well. That is for easy distribution at their final point of distribution. In addition, during that search warrant, we recovered an AR-15 style rifle and a 9mm handgun. I mention that because it is often lost in the discussion about the large drugs that are taken, but the potential for violence that goes along with drug trafficking organizations and their willingness potentially to use weapons to protect their profits and proceeds. Another traffic stop resulted in the seizure of roughly 28,000 pills on I-70. That particular shipment, we believe, was heading towards Tulsa. And it underscores the point that Special Agent in Charge Brian Besser made, that the Denver metro area is seen as a distribution point for the rest of the country, at least in this region. Those pills, again, while they were through this point in the Denver metro area, hit that highway and head out to parts unknown. So our job here is extremely important in intercepting and interdicting these large shipments. A couple other things that we found throughout the course of this investigation I want to draw your attention to. You'll see these pink pills here. Now, we talk quite a bit, folks, about the blue pills and the blues. I think it's really important that you understand and that the message gets out to the community. It is not just the blues, it's not just those M30s. You will also see fentanyl in a white form. You will see it in these pink forms as well, and this is something that is intended to attract the attention of younger users. I encourage you all to get the message out that none of these pills are safe. 40% of them are estimated to have a lethal dose in them, enough to kill somebody. Also, during the course of this investigation, we uncovered a money laundering operation. The main driver of this operation was a person named Carla Estefani Ramos Vasquez. I'll pause here real quick to mention, of course, that anybody who's been indicted, these are merely accusations. It is our job to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in a courtroom that each and every single defendant is guilty of the crimes charged and they are presumed innocent. Now, the indictment alleges that this individual operated a money remitter business out of the Denver area that sent money back to Mexico in relatively small amounts, believed to be the profits from this drug trafficking organization. A search warrant executed of that business found a storeroom in the back. Again, I'd encourage you to take a look at what you can see on this picture. This is unopened, very expensive power tools. And these are power tools we believe were stolen and then exchanged for narcotics. You can also see stacks and stacks of baby products to include diapers. Again, we're seeing the drug trade is not just the passing of money from person to person, but it is also impacting our community on a greater basis by driving burglaries and other crimes or retail theft that is then used to secure illicit narcotics. This particular individual that I mentioned earlier, Ms. Ramos Vasquez, has also been charged with a misdemeanor child abuse charge for distributing these drugs out of an apartment as well. The total seizures in this case, roughly 200,000 fentanyl pills. And if you think about a low amount street value of being roughly $10 per pill, you can see what sort of impact these seizures make on the bottom lines of the people who operate these drug trafficking organizations. There were 9.4 pounds of heroin seized, a kilo of cocaine, 4 guns, and approximately $60,000 in apparent stolen merchandise that were recovered during the course of this investigation. And with that, folks, I think it's imperative to hammer home that last point that I tried to make here, is that these people who are peddling this poison, it's not just about the user, it's not just about the distributor, but what they do impacts our community on a whole. It doesn't start and stop with the person who is selling and the person who is an addict. What we've seen, both with the rise of motor vehicle theft, with retail theft, with burglaries, we see it time and time again tied to people addicted to fentanyl and trying to feed a habit, resorting to other crimes that continue to impact our communities. With that, folks, I'm happy to open it up to any questions, or if these gentlemen wish to say a word as well. I know the sheriff's saying, yeah. Give me the mic. Yeah. We do appreciate you all being here. None of this happens without their hard work and really putting the assets in into these task forces that focus on these high-level distributors. The tough thing that we've seen, both in DA's offices and then law enforcement across the states, the ability to recruit and retain some of the top individuals. We've seen law enforcement agencies stressed without having enough staff and having to pull back from their task force officers being assigned to things like this. And this is why it's so important that people understand the scope of this problem and how much we need law enforcement support to be able to tackle it. Okay, and with that, I'll take any questions.
So, how important is testing in all of this? Assuming that users, people who are addicted to drugs, are going to continue to use something like cocaine, like MDMA, no matter, despite the risks. How much of an emphasis would you put on testing for the users who, still want to protect their lives? How reliable is testing, and how much did that play into this kind of conversation on fentanyl?
Yeah, I can't speak to the reliability of the fentanyl testing strips. I've not looked into the data behind that, so I can't say that it's always going to be 100% accurate, and I'd hate to have somebody rely on that and then find out that it's fentanyl and learn it the hard way and lose a life. I do think it's incredibly important with that fentanyl accountability bill that was passed, that there's money allocated for testing strips. I think that is part of addressing this on the user end, on the addict end, to at least give them some ability to understand whether or not what they're consuming is what they think it is. But again, the message to anybody out there who is thinking about using drugs is that there is nothing right now that we can say is safe. Frankly, it's not safe to begin with, but now fentanyl has made its way into practically every kind of narcotic on the street. So nothing is safe.
John,
Yeah, please go ahead, Brian.
I wanted to underscore too, fentanyl is a substance that's deadly in milligrams and micrograms, right? So even agents, my agents, test this substance if we have to underneath a controlled fumigation hood, with the proper personal protective equipment on. We do not advocate anyone testing for fentanyl, the presence of fentanyl or fentanyl analogs in public at all. It's deadly, and it's a total crapshoot. It's something that we're trying to re-educate the public on, not to even touch it or mess with it. As the DA noted on these photos right here, I wanted to draw attention to this. On these photos, you'll see exactly what he noted. These are personal packaging amounts. Many of these baggies oftentimes contain specifically enumerated amounts of pills, whether it's 1,000 pill baggies, 500 pill baggies, fill in the blank. It's whatever they're selling them for. But you can see how quickly and easily it is to secrete one of these bags in a backpack, front pocket, how easy these could be shouldered around in schools, which is what we're seeing. And you can only imagine if you are purchasing drugs like this on social media through nothing but emojis, and then going to a secure chat platform, and then going to a secure payment platform using nothing but cyber currency or Venmo or Zelle.